Ciao jewelry makers, I'm Joey Balistreri. Welcome back to our mini series on jewelry, tools, and supplies for complete beginners. So today we're going to use our round nose pliers and make some simple loops. Now with the round nose pliers, one thing to know is they have this cone shaped barrel. This end of the plier will give you very, very tiny loops, and as you can see, as you go down and wrap the wire around, your loops would get larger in size. So we're going to take one of those head pins that we have already talked about, and I have a faceted barrel bead here. I chose a large one so that hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to string that bead on the wire, and I'm going to create a loop on this end that matches as closely as possible to the one on this end. So the first thing I'm going to do is take one pair of my chain nose pliers and bend this eye pin right where it is exiting the bead. So if you can see what I did there, right where it comes out of the bead with very little space. Let me see if I can get my finger out of the way. I have created a bend in that eye pin. Now I want to hold on to it and guesstimate about 1/4 of an inch. Now I'm using my junkier cutters just because these head pins were very thick. They're a little bit hard to cut. So as I said in the very first video in this series, I do keep an older pair of cutters. It's not necessary for you, but I like to keep one pair that's really sharp, that's for finer work and more delicate wire cutting. So I'm going to use my junky cutters for this, and I'm going to leave about 1/4 of an inch there, put my pliers or my cutters in place. Now you absolutely need to hang on to this in some way or face it down to your mat, because a lot of times when you cut wire, it flies and you don't know where it's going to go, and you definitely don't want that in your eye or to hurt you in your face or even somewhere in your house, if you have pets and children. So anyway, we definitely want to be careful before we press down and cut this, that we have guarded where that wire is going to go. So I tend to aim it down toward my mat and hold on to it with my finger and give that a cut. So that time I held on to it. So now we have this tiny little piece of wire, and I'm going to take those round nose pliers and get a hold of it near the end and give it a bend backwards, and then just rotate my pliers and in little movements just make that loop. Okay. Now, not always will you want your loops to be oriented in the same direction. Depending on your design, sometimes you want one to go horizontal to your mat and perpendicular to your mat. Since we're only doing this for practice, we don't know that, but I'm going to show you what to do if your loops are not aligned and you want them aligned. So there again, these two pairs of pliers are really handy, one in each hand. So I'm going to hold on to one end with that bent chain nose plier and come in with my regular chain nose pliers and grab that other loop and just twist until they are lined up completely parallel with each other. And we have a simple loop on a bead. So let's do one more together. Same bead, same eye pin, thread the bead on the eye pin, and then take one of your pairs of chain nose pliers and right where that wire is exiting the bead, give it a bend. And now we want to get a hold of it, take our cutters, leaving ourselves about 1/4 of an inch. Make sure you're covering that cut, aiming it down to your mat, especially on thicker wire like this one. And now we have that small little stem, and we want to get a hold of it with our round nose pliers. Do a slight roll backwards, rotate your pliers, and just roll it back. To go one more roll to make sure it's closed. And there again, I want to straighten them, align them. So this one, I wasn't really paying attention, and as you can see, one loop is going horizontal, one is going perpendicular, and there are designs where that's what you want. But just for practice today, we're going to get a hold of it with our 2 pliers and pretend we want them even and straighten them out just like that. So that is a simple loop. And I did a few samples for you. And then from here, you can do whatever you want with the beads. Again, once you've made a simple loop, we're back to that same maneuver that we did with jump rings, where you gently twist that loop open, and then you can connect it to another bead if you want, and close it, or connect it to an ear wire, so from there you can continue to design. But that is a simple loop. Now, one other thing just to add to your design repertoire is that from here, if you have a lot of simple loops, you can not open those loops. You can use some jump rings, really any size, again, depending on your design. You can create a beaded chain by either connecting these components that you've just made, or you can connect them with jump rings. So just like in our last lesson, we opened and closed the jump ring by twisting forward and then making sure we have a complete round shape. We have just made the beginning of a beaded chain. And so it looks really beautiful. And I have to make a recommendation at this point, and this is what I did. When I started making simple loops, I took out my bead soup, which is all the little miscellaneous leftover beads from all of my projects and anything that I liked, and I sat and just did this on every single bead that I had, and I just kept going for practice. And I did an entire long necklace over the head with no closure at all, no lobster clasp, no toggle clasp. I just did it to keep repeating this step, this for practice, so that I could become adept at making these simple loops. So that is a great idea, is to make yourself a necklace out of any beads you want and just do the simple loops on every bead until you just feel really comfortable making them. And at the end of your practice session, you have a beautiful necklace that you can wear. So that is what I would advise you to do. So anyway, in our next video, we are going to take some wire and we are going to make some wrapped loops with these same tools yet again. So I hope this was slow enough and easy enough for you to follow, and I hope you'll start practicing that. And I will see you next week for our next video in this series. Thank you for being with me today. Ciao, jewelry makers.